This story is titled, Wife Cheated in Front of Our Son. So, I gave her a lesson. She will never forget. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hey Reddit, this is my first time posting, and I don't really know how to start this. Honestly, I'm just here because I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone out there can help me make sense of it. I've been holding this in for days, and I feel like I'm going to explode if I don't talk about it. So, some context first. I'm 26 years old, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, also 26, for 6 years. We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter. On the surface, our life looked pretty good, or at least I thought it did. I work as a manager for an IT company, which keeps me busy, but I've always made it a point to spend as much time as I can with my family. Emily is a receptionist at a hospital, though she hasn't been working much lately because of maternity leave. Emily and I are pretty different personality-wise. I'm the outgoing type. I like meeting people, going to events, and being social. Emily, on the other hand, is more introverted. She's close with her family and a handful of childhood friends, but doesn't really step out of her comfort zone. She's happiest at home with the kids or spending time with her parents. I've always admired that about her. How grounded she is. Or at least I used to. Everything changed on July 1st. I wasn't home that day because I'd gone to visit my parents, who live about 5 miles away. I figured it was a normal Saturday, just like any other. Around lunchtime, one of my former employees, Matt, he's 23, apparently stopped by the house. He had some documents of mine that I'd left at his place the day before when we were discussing work stuff. Matt thought I'd be home because I don't work weekends, so he decided to drop them off in person. I didn't find out about this visit until a couple of days later, when Matt called me. I'll get to that in a bit. But at the time, all I knew was that Matt had stopped by, and Emily let him in. She told me later that she didn't recognize him, and didn't think much of it when he said he worked for me. She offered him coffee while he waited, which honestly sounded like a polite, normal thing to do. What I didn't know, what I never could have imagined, was what happened after that. Fast forward to July 3rd, and I get this call from Matt. It was out of the blue, and I could immediately tell something was off from the tone of his voice. He started the conversation by apologizing, which caught me off guard. I asked him what he was apologizing for, and that's when he dropped the bombshell. Do you know about me and your wife? At first, I didn't even understand the question. I asked him what he meant, and he started explaining. He said that when he came by on July 1st, Emily invited him in, and they started talking. Apparently, they hit it off over some shared interest in books or something. He said they were talking about literature, which struck me as odd because Emily's not even much of a reader. But whatever. He said the conversation turned friendly, and then, somehow, it escalated. He admitted that they kissed first. I don't know who initiated it. He didn't say, and honestly, I was too shocked to ask. Then he said they took things upstairs. That's right. They went to our bedroom. I was frozen on the other end of the line, but Matt kept talking, like he needed to get it all out. He told me something that made my blood run cold. My son walked into the living room while they were downstairs. My 5-year-old son. He said my son asked who he was, and Emily told him to go watch TV. Just like that, like it was nothing. Then they went upstairs and had sex while my son was in the house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to hang up right then and there, but I needed to know if he was lying. I asked him why he was telling me this now, and his answer was almost worse than the confession itself. He said he felt guilty, especially because my son had seen him, and he didn't want me to find out years later and think he didn't care. He said he'd already quit his job because he couldn't handle the guilt of working with me after what happened. I lost it. I told him I didn't believe him and that he must be trying to cause trouble. But the thing is, Matt didn't sound angry or vengeful. He sounded remorseful? I don't know. He just kept saying he was sorry and that he thought I deserved to know the truth. Before I hung up, he said one last thing. I didn't force her. She's the one who's married, not me. That line has been playing in my head ever since. I still don't know how to process it. When I got off the phone, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I was shaking. My hands, my legs, even my voice when I tried to tell myself to calm down. I couldn't think straight. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if it was all some elaborate lie or if my wife, had actually done this. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling sick to my stomach. By the morning, I knew I had to confront Emily. A part of me hoped she would deny it, and that Matt was just lying to mess with me. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. After that phone call with Matt, I was completely wrecked. I stayed up the entire night going over everything in my head. The worst part wasn't even what he said. It was the way he said it. There wasn't any spite or anger in his voice. If anything, he sounded nervous, like someone who knows they've done something terrible, but wants to make amends, even if it's too late. That's what made it feel real. And honestly, that's what made it so much worse. The morning after the call, I drove back to the house. I hadn't told Emily I was coming back, and the whole way there, I was rehearsing what I was going to say. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was pissed, obviously, but more than that, I was hurt. I kept picturing her face when I walked in. Would she deny it? Would she admit it? How the hell was I even going to handle this? When I got home, the kids were in the living room watching TV. Emily was in the kitchen, humming to herself while making breakfast. It was such a normal scene, and for a second, I felt like I'd stepped into some alternate reality. How could she act like everything was fine after what had happened? I didn't beat around the bush. I told her I needed to talk to her privately, and we went upstairs. As soon as the door closed, I turned to her and said, "Matt called me." That was it. Just those 3 words. Her reaction was immediate. She froze, her eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. "What did he say?" she asked, but her voice cracked as she said it. I told her everything. Every word Matt had said on the phone, down to the smallest detail. As I spoke, I could see the color draining from her face. At first, she tried to deny it. She said Matt was lying, that he must be trying to get back at me for something. But when I mentioned the part about our son walking in, she broke. She started crying, and it wasn't just a few tears. It was full-on sobbing. She kept saying, I'm sorry," over and over again, like that was supposed to fix everything. I stood there watching her, and I felt nothing. No pity, no sympathy. Just this overwhelming sense of betrayal. I asked her why she did it. Her answer? I don't know. She said it wasn't planned, that it just happened in the moment. She blamed herself for being too friendly and letting things escalate. She said she felt lonely, that I'd been so busy with work and the kids that she felt like we weren't connecting anymore. But even as she was saying all this, I couldn't bring myself to care. Nothing she said could justify what she'd done. Then I asked her the question that had been haunting me since the phone call. Did you even think about our son? Did you think about what it would do to him to see that? Her sobbing got worse. She kept saying she didn't know what to say, that she didn't think about it at the time. I told her that wasn't good enough. Our son deserves better than this. I said I needed space, and that I was going to stay with my parents for a while. Before I left, I went back to the living room to say goodbye to the kids. My son looked up at me with this big smile and said, "Daddy, are you staying home today?" I swear, that nearly broke me. I had to fight back tears as I hugged him and told him I'd see him soon. When I got back to my parents' place, I broke down. I hadn't cried until that point, but seeing my son so happy and oblivious to everything, it was too much. My parents were there for me, though. They listened while I told them everything, and my dad was furious. He kept saying, "How could she do this? How could she let another man into your home?" My mom, on the other hand, was more focused on the kids. She said we needed to make sure they were protected from all of this, especially my son. That night, I started looking into divorce. I knew I couldn't stay with Emily after what she'd done. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the fact that she'd done it in front of our son, and then lied to me about it. How do you come back from that? I texted Emily to let her know I'd be filing for divorce. She begged me to come home so we could talk, but I told her there was nothing left to say. I said I'd be willing to co-parent for the kids' sake, but that was it. She kept texting me, saying she'd do anything to fix things, but I didn't respond. That's where things stand now. I'm staying with my parents while I figure out the next steps. I've spoken to a lawyer about my options, and I've started gathering the necessary documents. The house is in my name, which is a small relief, but custody is going to be tricky. I want to be there for my kids as much as possible, but I also know the courts don't always favor fathers. I'm trying to stay strong for my kids, but it's hard. Every time I think about what Emily did, I feel sick. I keep picturing her with Matt in our bedroom, and it's like a knife to the gut. Thanks for reading, and thanks again to everyone who commented on my first post. Your advice and support mean more than you know. If anyone has tips on how to handle custody or divorce proceedings, especially in the UK, I'm all ears. Update 1 point. Hey Reddit, I'm back with another update. If you've been following my story, first of all, thank you for the advice and support. I've read through so many comments, and while this whole thing is tearing me apart, it's comforting to know I'm not alone in dealing with this kind of betrayal. After I confronted Emily and decided to stay with my parents, things started to sink in. The initial shock and anger gave way to this deep, hollow feeling, like I'd lost a part of my life I thought was solid. I'd look back on moments from our marriage and question everything. Was this the only time she cheated? Or were there others I didn't know about? I kept trying to piece together signs I might have missed. But honestly, she hid this too well. Emily's parents called me a couple of days after I left. I didn't expect them to get involved, but apparently she told them everything. Her mom was crying on the phone, apologizing for what Emily had done, like it was somehow her fault. Her dad, on the other hand, was pissed. At her, not me. He kept saying, "This is not how we raised her." They both begged me not to make any rash decisions, but I told them I'd already decided. I made it clear that while I had no intention of keeping them from their grandchildren, my marriage to Emily was over. Her mom said she understood but asked if I'd consider counseling. If not for you two, then for the kids. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I don't see the point. I had to explain the situation to my 5-year-old in a way he could understand. I didn't tell him the whole truth. He's too young for that. But I did say that Daddy was staying with Grandpa and Grandma for a little while, and that everything would be okay. He asked me, "Is Mommy coming too?" And I swear, my heart shattered. I just told him, "Not right now, buddy." As for Emily, she's been texting me constantly. At first, it was all apologies. Long paragraphs about how sorry she is, how she'll do whatever it takes to make things right, how she didn't mean to hurt anyone. But then the tone shifted. She started blaming me. She said I was too focused on work, that I wasn't emotionally available, that she felt invisible in our marriage. That one hit me like a punch to the gut. I've worked hard my whole life to provide for my family. I've put in extra hours, skipped out on social events, and made sacrifices because I thought it was for the greater good. And now she's saying that wasn't enough? That, because I wasn't constantly validating her, she had no choice but to sleep with someone else? I didn't respond to her messages. I couldn't. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach turned. It got to the point where I had to mute her texts because I couldn't handle the constant reminders of what she'd done. Meanwhile, I've been meeting with a lawyer to figure out my next steps. Divorce in the UK can be tricky, especially when kids are involved, but I'm determined to protect my rights as a father. The house is in my name, so I'm not too worried about losing that. But custody is another story. I've heard horror stories about dads getting the short end of the stick, even when their ex is the one who cheated. I've been documenting everything. Texts, emails, the call with Matt, even the confrontation with Emily. My lawyer says it's good to have a paper trail, especially if things get messy. I also started keeping a journal where I write down everything that's happened, including how much time I'm spending with the kids. It feels weird, like I'm building a case against my own wife, but I guess that's what it's come to. Emily has been surprisingly cooperative about custody so far. She agreed to a temporary 50-50 arrangement while we sort out the legal stuff, but I'm not sure how long that will last. Part of me wonders if she's being nice now because she feels guilty, but what happens when that guilt fades? Will she try to take the kids from me out of spite? I don't know, and that uncertainty is eating me alive. One of the hardest parts of all this has been keeping things normal for my children. My daughter is too young to understand what's happening, but my son, he's smart. Smarter than I give him credit for sometimes. He knows something's wrong, even if he doesn't have the words for it yet. The other day, we were playing with his toys at my parents' house, and out of nowhere, he said, "I miss Mommy." I told him it was okay to miss her and that he'd see her soon, but inside I felt like I'd failed him. No matter how much I hate Emily for what she did, she's still their mother, and I don't want to ruin their relationship with her. But how do I balance that with my own feelings? How do I co-parent with someone I can barely look at without feeling sick? I've also been thinking a lot about what Matt said, that he told me because he didn't want my son to carry that memory without me knowing. I keep wondering how much my son actually remembers. Does he know what he saw? Will it come back to him later in life? And if it does, how do I explain it to him without screwing him up even more? For now, I'm just taking things one day at a time. I've started going to the gym again, partly to blow off steam and partly because I need something, anything, to distract me from the mess my life has become. My parents have been incredible, helping out with the kids and giving me space when I need it. I've also been thinking about therapy. Not for me and Emily, but for myself. I've never been the kind of guy to talk about my feelings, but maybe it's time to start. I don't want to carry this bitterness around forever, and I definitely don't want it to affect how I parent my kids. I haven't told many people about what happened. Just my parents, my lawyer, and a close friend I trust. It's embarrassing, you know? Admitting that your wife cheated on you, that she brought another man into your home, into your bedroom. It feels like a punch to the gut every time I say it out loud. Thanks again to everyone who's been following my story. Writing this all out has been weirdly therapeutic, even if it's painful to relive. If you have any advice, especially about co-parenting or custody arrangements, I'd love to hear it. Update 2.0. Hey Reddit, it's been a few more days, and things keep getting messier. I wanted to update everyone because writing these posts has been one of the only ways I've been able to process all of this. If you've read my previous posts, you know the basics. My wife, Emily, cheated on me with one of my former employees, Matt, and I've been staying with my parents while trying to figure out my next steps. This chapter is about what's been happening since the dust started to settle, or at least I thought it had. After our confrontation, Emily and I settled into this awkward, distant form of communication. Most of it has been through text, and I've only seen her in person a handful of times when I went to pick up or drop off the kids. At first, she was all apologies, but now it feels like she's trying to shift the narrative. She started sending me these long messages about how she feels abandoned and how my leaving has made her realize what she's lost. One of her latest messages said, "I don't even recognize myself anymore. I was in such a dark place and I made a mistake. But why did you just walk away instead of helping me through it?" I don't even know how to respond to that. It's like she's rewriting what happened to make herself the victim, and I'm the bad guy for not sticking around. It's frustrating because no matter how much I want to yell at her or argue, I know that'll only make things worse for the kids. Our temporary custody arrangement is still in place, 50-50, with the kids splitting their time between my parents' house and our home. I hate the idea of being away from them for even a few days, but I've been doing my best to make the time I have with them as normal and happy as possible. What's been bothering me lately is how Emily is handling her time with the kids. My son has started mentioning things she said, and it's making me nervous. For example, he told me, "Mommy said you're really mad at her, but she still loves you." That threw me. I don't want him caught in the middle of this, and I don't think it's fair for her to frame things that way. I brought it up to her over text, trying to keep it calm and respectful, but she got defensive. She said, "I'm just being honest with him. He needs to know that his parents still care about each other, even if we're not together." I told her that what he needs is stability, not mixed messages. She didn't reply after that. Something else came up recently that's been eating away at me. One of my coworkers, someone I trust, reached out to me privately. They told me they'd heard rumors about Emily and Matt before any of this came to light. Apparently, a few people noticed that Matt had been acting weird at work before he quit, and some of them even speculated that something was going on between him and my wife. Hearing that hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd been telling myself that this was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness, but now I'm not so sure. Was there more to this than I thought? Did their relationship start earlier? Maybe while Matt was still working for me? I don't have any proof, but the idea has been gnawing at me. I don't want to spiral into paranoia, but I can't stop asking myself questions. Were there other guys before Matt? Is this just the one I found out about? And if this was an ongoing thing, how could she keep it hidden for so long? My son has been asking more questions lately, and it's been tough to answer them. He's old enough to sense that something isn't right, but not old enough to fully understand. The other night he asked me, "Are you and Mommy still married?" I froze. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to overwhelm him with details he's too young to process. I told him, "Mommy and Daddy are figuring some things out, but we both love you very much." He nodded like he understood, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. My daughter is too young to know what's happening, but she's been more clingy lately. She cries when I leave the room, even for a minute, and it breaks my heart. I feel like I'm letting them both down, even though I know this isn't my fault. One silver lining in all of this has been the support I've gotten from my parents and a few close friends. My mom has been incredible, helping out with the kids and keeping things as normal as possible for them. My dad, though, has been struggling to hide his anger. He doesn't talk about it much, but I can see it in the way he clenches his jaw whenever Emily's name comes up. My best friend, Mark, has been a rock through all of this. He's the kind of guy who tells it like it is, and he hasn't sugarcoated anything. He told me flat out, "You deserve better, man. Don't let her guilt you into staying." Hearing that from someone who's known me since we were kids has helped me stay grounded. I'm meeting with my lawyer again next week to finalize the divorce paperwork. We've already discussed some preliminary things like financial arrangements and custody, but there's still a long road ahead. I've been reading up on co-parenting after divorce, trying to figure out how to make this work for the kids' sake. One thing I'm struggling with is the idea of forgiving Emily. Not for her sake, but for mine. I don't mean forgetting what she did or letting her back into my life, but letting go of the anger. Right now, it's like this constant weight on my chest, and I don't want it to consume me. I've started looking into therapy, not just for me, but possibly for my son too. I don't know how much he remembers or understands about what happened, but I want to make sure he has someone to talk to if he needs it. That's where things stand for now. I'm taking it one day at a time, trying to keep my focus on the kids and the future. Thanks again to everyone who's been reading and commenting. It means more than you know. If anyone has advice about co-parenting or how to navigate these tough conversations with kids, I'm all ears. Final update. Hey Reddit, this is going to be my last update for a while. So much has happened, and I feel like I've finally turned a corner. I've gotten a lot of support from people here, and I just want to say thank you. It's helped me keep my head straight through all of this. But now, I think I'm at a point where I can focus on the future. Let me walk you through the latest developments. As the divorce proceedings have progressed, I've made sure to protect myself and my kids while setting firm boundaries with Emily. One of the things I realized early on was how much she had relied on me financially. Not just for herself, but for her parents, too. Before all this, I was the one covering most of the bills. I helped pay for things like her parents' mortgage shortfalls, repairs on their old car, and even groceries when they were struggling. I never complained because I thought we were family, and family supports each other. But now, that's all on her. When I moved out and cut financial ties with her, it was like pulling the rug out from under her. Suddenly, Emily had to face a reality where she wasn't cushioned by my income. She works part-time as a receptionist, and while it's a decent job, it's nowhere near enough to maintain the lifestyle we had as a family, or to keep helping her parents the way I used to. Her parents have started feeling the effects too. Last week, her dad called me, probably thinking I'd bail them out again like before. He mentioned how the house needs some repairs and hinted that they're behind on a few payments. I told him calmly but firmly that I'm no longer in a position to help. I said, I did what I could when Emily and I were together, but now I need to focus on my kids and my own future. He wasn't happy, but what could he say? He knew the situation, and I wasn't about to back down. As for Emily, she's struggling, and it shows. She's still living in our family home for now, but I've made it clear that the house is mine, and the divorce agreement will reflect that. Once the legal process is complete, she'll have to move out. She's been trying to play nice, but every so often, the cracks show. The other day, during one of our custody exchanges, she mentioned how hard things have been for her. She said something like, "You don't understand how stressful it is to juggle the kids, work, and everything else." I just looked at her and said, I think I understand perfectly. I've been doing it for years, only I didn't have someone to fall back on when I messed up. I didn't say it to be cruel, but I'm done letting her guilt trip me. She made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. Emily's parents are feeling the heat even more than she is. They were heavily dependent on the financial support I provided, and now that's gone. I know it sounds harsh, but I don't feel bad about it. For years, I stepped up because I thought we were a team. I thought helping her family was part of being a good husband. But after everything she's done, I can't keep putting myself out there for people who stood by while she betrayed me. Her mom even called me recently, crying about how they're falling behind on bills and how Emily just doesn't have the means to help them like I did. I told her as respectfully as I could that I'm sorry for their situation, but my priority is my kids. It felt weird to draw that line after all these years, but also liberating. I've been carrying their burdens for too long. Emily has tried to pick up the slack for them, but it's clearly taking a toll. She's picking up extra shifts at work, but it's not enough. She mentioned in passing that she's thinking about selling some of her stuff to make ends meet. A part of me wonders if she finally understands the weight of everything I carried during our marriage, but honestly, it's too late for her to come to that realization now. Despite everything, my main focus is still on my kids. I'm making sure they're shielded from the drama as much as possible. They don't need to know about the financial struggles or the tension between their mom and me. All they need to know is that they're loved and supported. I've also started putting money aside for their future, something I didn't have the luxury of doing before, because I was too busy helping Emily and her family. It feels good to know that I'm building something that will benefit them directly. My son has been doing better too. He's adjusted to the new routine, and we've fallen into a rhythm with our time together. I've been trying to make the most of it, whether it's helping him with his homework, taking him to the park, or just sitting with him and listening to his thoughts. He's such a smart, thoughtful kid, and I want to make sure he grows up feeling secure, no matter what happens between me and his mom. One thing I've learned through all of this is that you can't let people walk all over you. For too long, I put everyone else's needs ahead of my own, thinking it was the right thing to do. But now I realize that taking care of myself is just as important, especially if I want to be the best father I can be. Emily has been trying to get back into my good graces, even bringing up the idea of counseling again. But I've stayed firm in my decision. This marriage is over, and no amount of therapy is going to change that. She can figure out her own path forward. As for me, I'm focusing on building a better life for myself and my kids. I've been looking into new career opportunities that would allow me to spend more time with them, and I'm even thinking about going back to school part-time to pick up some new skills. It's not easy, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own life. If there's one thing I've learned through this process, it's that you can't save someone who doesn't want to save themselves. Emily made her choices, and now she has to deal with the consequences. I've done my part, and now it's time for me to move on. To everyone who's supported me throughout this journey, thank you. Your advice, your words of encouragement, and even your tough love have made all the difference. I'm still figuring things out, but I know I'll come out stronger on the other side. Here's to new beginnings.